I want to start off the way I guess a lot of these conversations probably start off with just if I could have both of you just explain why you think that you're the best candidate for this job, and I guess we'll go in alphabetical order. So Hillary Cassel, let's start with you. Why do you think you're the best person to be the state representative here?
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney, for that question. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Silla. I look forward to seeing you out on the campaign trail. I think it's quite simple. I think it's based on experience. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law for the last 16 years. Obviously, one of the biggest aspects and components of being a legislator is understanding the law, how it applies and how it works. And I've done that for the last 16 years of a legal career. But more importantly, my engagement with the community. I am honored to serve on the board of directors for the chamber, for the greatest chamber of commerce here in Hollywood. I am a small business owner. And I know what it's like to, be responsible for people's livelihoods and to, sign my name on the front of that check and what that entails. I'm also a proud advocate to eradicate the stigma surrounding mental health as a survivor myself of bipolar 2. I think it's really important that we have representation to show a different side of what mental health and mental illness looks like. It's such an issue that permeates our community. And I think all of those skills, being a mom, a small business owner, actively engaged in my community, serving on the board of directors of several associations, the Federal Association of Insurance Reform, which, as we know, insurance and property and casualty insurance is a huge topic of conversation here in the state. So I think all of those attributes make me the most qualified to serve as the next state representative for this amazing district.
And Mr. Silla, how about you? What makes you the best candidate for the job?
Well, Dan, I want to thank you and the Sun Sentinel, and hopefully Steve is doing well. And I'm glad we're here and have this time to answer questions that I'm sure are on everyone's mind. I was born and raised in South Florida, moved to Hollywood over 20 years ago. I'm married to my wife, Sarah, for over 25 years. I have 2 sons. I've been in the construction business for over 35 years now, and I started my own company when I was 19 years old. What I think I bring to the table is experience with infrastructure and construction in general. As you know, in the past, since 2019, Florida has invested over $1 billion for infrastructure, and I think with my experience, I have a lot to offer in that field. I deal with a lot of municipalities throughout Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties on infrastructure and different construction projects. I know how to negotiate contracts, and I always work to find a middle ground that works best in all situations. I'm not just an owner, but I actually go out there and do the work. I speak every day, men and women who make these projects achievable. And I hear firsthand about their lives, their families, and how hard it is getting by with today's out of control cost of living. And I'm running the everyday person for both parties to have a better life in Florida. And I think I have a lot to offer in that field.
Thank you. You mentioned both parties here, and I want to just run a couple of numbers by you because, as a Republican running in District 101, the just not about fundraising or anything like that, but just the pure numbers of voter registrations, it's a fairly daunting task. According to the latest book closing report, which is from the August primary, there's 106,000 voters. These numbers will be behind the times a little bit. If you go to the Broward supervisor elections office, they'd be a little more current, but just to give you a rough estimate, the Republican voters there are around 25,500 and Democratic voters are around 44,500. It's a big difference. So obviously you're going to need some Democratic votes if you're going to win this thing. What do you say to Democrats to convince them that they should go with the Republican in this race?
Well, I entered this race to give people a choice. And I am running as a Republican, and I want to let them know I don't have any extreme agendas, and I like to represent both sides. I mean, I'm a people person. I work with all the blue-collar workers out there. I don't have any associations with anyone in the State House or with any party in general, or I don't have any affiliations with any companies or groups that are going to sway me one way or the other. I'm actually here to work for all the constituents in my district.
Have you received any funding from the party or anything like that?
I haven't received any funding. I did receive a small contribution from the Broward GOP, but other than that, I funded my campaign on my own.
Okay. Hillary Cassel, what would you say is the most important issue to voters in District 101?
I mean, I think right now it's affordability. I think that's on everybody's mind, you know, and when you take into consideration, I believe part of that affordability crisis is in relation to our property insurance. You know, it really is keeping people who could be in a position to buy a home from being able to do so, which is keeping them in a rental status, which is then creating more, you know, a lack of availability for rentals for people to find that. But it's the cost of gas. It's the concern over, you know, living paycheck to paycheck, which I've done pretty much my entire adult life. You know, I come from a blue collar family. My father's actually a contractor. I grew up on construction sites, and that's where I learned really my strong sense of work ethic. But I think that's really what's hitting everybody. But also, in addition to that, knowing that, you know, their fundamental rights are under attack. You know, access to being able to vote, learning about our state's history, learning about our country's history. You know, having the ability for a woman to make a decision about her own body. Those fundamental rights are on the top of everybody's mind because, you know, we know that times are good and bad. That's life. And we're going to get through this part of it. But if we get through this and I don't have the ability to make a decision about my body, then what right do I really have? How free am I in this country? So I think those things are on top of everybody's mind.
Guy Silla, affordability and housing and property insurance, would you call that the top, or at least one of the top issues in District 101? And if not, what would you say it is?
I think it is. I mean, of course, everybody has problems nowadays with the affordability on anything. I mean, you go to the grocery store, your $100 isn't going where it used to go. You used to carry a couple bags out, and now you're only carrying one bag out. I mean, if you want to look at it that way. I think our state and our country as a whole is dealing with this crisis. Unfortunately, I don't think Florida has in the state has the power to control the gas prices. I know Governor DeSantis is implemented a 25 cents decrease on the state tax to lower the prices to help us. And of course, insurance is out of control, and there's a lot of issues probably why insurance is out of control besides the hurricanes. Yeah.
Can you delve into that? Delve into that a little more. Why is insurance out of control? Because you mentioned this is a nationwide problem with gas and housing and groceries. Yeah, that is. And inflation is not a nationwide problem. It's an international problem. You know, there's huge inflation in, you know, all over the world, particularly in developed countries. But property insurance is a Florida problem. I mean, you know, it's crazy here. So what can the state do that it has not done already to address this?
Well, I think we really have to go after the fraudulent claims that Florida deals with all the time. In the past 10 years, I think the insurance companies have paid out almost $51 billion. And of that $51 billion, as I've researched, 71% of that has gone to attorneys and public adjusters. And as they, I'm sure, work hard for our citizens in our state, to get what they deserve from insurance companies. I see firsthand as a contractor that there is a lot of fraud going on. There's a lot of companies that go out there that do fire, water, and mold damage. And I've witnessed firsthand where they have meters and they scan walls and say, oh, there's moisture. And I'm like, well, we live in Florida. We have 100% humidity. It doesn't matter what wall you scan in which house. There's going to be damage or going to be moisture in that wall. And they go in and start cutting up the walls, and then, you know, the insurance companies have to come in and replace stuff that really didn't need to be replaced in the first place. And I understand roofing is a huge part of our insurance because of the age of the roof. I mean, if it's 15 years or older, insurance companies don't want to insure you. And I think there's an option or should be an option on the table where insurance companies shouldn't be held accountable for roofs that may have been leaking before a storm, and then during a storm, people come and say, "Oh, my roof is leaking," and the insurance company can't prove it was leaking before or after. And a lot of people come and make claims and they have to replace the entire roof. And then you have a lot of contractors out there going around and unfortunately repairing roofs, signing away the owner's legal rights to any lawsuits that they file against the insurance company, and replacing entire roofs that really don't need to be replaced. I think there should be some type of prorate for insurance companies on a roof. If it's so many years old, they give you so much, and prorate it this way. I think that would help insurance costs to be lowered, so the insurance companies don't have the whole, bundle in their hands and have to deal with all the costs.
Gotcha. Hillary, there's an old joke that Florida is a sunny place for shady people. Is that sort of is it fraud? Is that the main and thing that's going on with property insurance in the state, or is there something else at work?
So there's definitely something else at work. When I got engaged in the legislative process over 4 years ago through the political committee that I founded, Florida Policyholders Cooperative, which is an organization dedicated to advocating for the consumer side of this issue. And the consumer side of this issue is making sure consumers have access to affordable, available, and reliable insurance. And there is absolutely a part of this equation that Mr. Silla referred to that is a part of the problem. But we passed significant reforms in 2021. And I say we, I obviously wasn't a part of the legislature, but I was engaged in the process where we actively advocated for some of these reforms that would stop roofers from the improper solicitation, closing the loopholes on assignment of benefits, lowering the time frame to report claims. But we also see that hasn't worked. And why hasn't that worked? Because that's not the number one driver of the issue. It is great. It is the insurance company's position, because what's the first thing to do? Point the finger at everybody else. But we do not have an elected insurance commissioner who's actually engaged in looking at their participation in the process. I ask insurance companies all the time, if fraud is so big, why aren't you doing more to combat it? And the response is, well, it's just too expensive. Well, I run a business and my goal is to be profitable. So if there's an aspect of my business that's keeping me from being profitable, I'm going to look to correct that. And that's not the reality. The reforms that passed in 2021 haven't moved the needle at all, because that's not really the big issue that's causing this. 49% of your premium cost goes to reinsurance. We have companies that started in the state of Florida that were never capitalized enough to handle the types of claims that we see here in the state. And we know that because the only rating agency that will rate our insurance companies is Demotech. The big national rating agency says from the very beginning, our domestic carriers never had the capital to sustain the types of claims that we see here in the state of Florida. So we've got a rating system that isn't equivalent to what we see at a national level. We are beholden, our domestic carriers are beholden to a global reinsurance market that drives their costs up year after year. We're not just paying for the risk here in Florida, we're paying for the risk globally. That's what reinsurance companies do. They say for the price tag to reinsure insurance companies in Florida, we've got to look at all of our risks. And that's getting passed to our consumers. So 49% of what they're paying is actually to protect an insurance company so they can then have reinsurance. So we've really got to look at creating a new system here in the state. This isn't the first time we've been in this crisis. We were here in 1992 after Andrew. We were here after Hurricane Wilma and the storms that wrecked us in 04 and 05. And we're here again. And insurance companies leave us when times get tough. And the reality is that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the next storm hits. We're not even through the heart. We are still reeling from Ian, and we're going to see carriers say, you know what, this state's too risky. So I think the state of Florida is going to have to do a better job of protecting consumers from carriers staying for 10 years when we didn't have a hurricane. Where'd all that money go? And leaving when the next storm hits.
Demotech, essentially said that a lot of the local insurers, and some of the big insurers won't even write lines here anymore. A lot of the local insurers, they said, do not have enough money to pay out claims. you know, on a long enough timeline, with the, you know, on a long enough timeline, the entire Florida coast is at risk from one hurricane or another. Big insurance companies are already not coming here. And you mentioned, you know, 1992 and all of that. Well, those were crises, but we were already in a property insurance crisis when Hurricane Ian hit. So have we reached a point, given, you know, sea level rise and all these other issues, that certain areas of Florida are simply uninsurable on an open, private, you know, free market?
I think we have to face the reality that that's a huge, that is the reality that we face. And that if we can create a system here in Florida and allow for the state to provide that support as well as a national catastrophe plan, maybe then when these carriers come back or when they decide to rewrite, the risk and the burden isn't so large. But at this point, you know, they come when it's good, which when has it really been good? Our market is always susceptible to these types of claims. So they come in, they leave, they come in, they leave. And we can't, as the consumers, carry that on our back anymore. It's too expensive. We know that many of these companies are going to put their liabilities into FIGA. That falls on the taxpayers. We know that citizens, if they don't have the surplus to pay these claims, it's going to fall on the policyholders. It's going to fall on Floridians. So we have got to come up with a system where we don't bear the brunt of it as taxpayers and look to a national catastrophe plan, because the reality is, with sea level on the rise, we've seen through Hurricane Dorian, Hurricane Harvey, and now Hurricane Ian, these storms are creating water catastrophes. It's really no longer the wind that's even the biggest problem. It's the flood, it's the water, it's the surge. And we've also got to start talking and educating consumers on the importance of flood. I have helped thousands of Floridians across the state in times of their greatest need. And the hardest conversation to have with them is to say, you don't have the right coverage, because they weren't educated on the coverage that they needed. And flood is the future of Florida. We all need flood coverage being in Florida, you know, not just based on FEMA maps that are outdated, that don't provide, you know, updated reality as to what we all face here in the state of Florida.
Guy, stipulating that fraud is an issue and not glossing over that, what do you do about areas, you know, coastal, low-lying areas in the insurance market? I can remember, you know, back when I was covering the state legislature regularly, there was a time then that the big story was that we're moving all of these property insurance, all these houses off of citizens, that they were moving thousands of people back into the private insurance market. That is obviously no longer the case. What can we do about these areas, you know, that where it's not fraud, it's simply a matter of just the actuarial numbers?
That's a tough question, and as Hillary stated, something has to be done, whether it's on a federal level, state level. But I think we have to combine some type of insurance to help the homeowners here in South Florida, because like she said, it doesn't matter. We are at Hurricane Valley, if you'd like to say, just like California with wildfires. I mean, every year there's a massive acreage of wildfires in California that destroys homes. So, I mean, there has to be something that we could be able to work across all states, not just our state. You got Tornado Alley, that we have devastating tornadoes every year. So, I mean, we have to get together as a state and as in the federal government to work to see how we can get with the insurance companies to make sure everybody is insured and are covered. And as you said, not on the backs of all the citizens that live on the beach or in Florida in general. It doesn't really matter if you live on the beach. We're a peninsula. I mean, if a storm like that, what we just experienced, comes across the entire, you know, South Florida, it could wipe out Naples and the east coast of Florida, which would be devastating. And I just feel horrible for what happened on the West Coast to everyone. Yeah, this is just hopefully someone can figure it out, but it's going to be an ongoing brainstorm of the minds to see how we can all work together and insure people in Florida.
outside of the Florida legislature, then you would both be in agreement that on the federal level, we need something like a national catastrophe fund?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to move on to a different subject. Clarify something for me, Guy. You said
Yes.
in our questionnaire, you said we asked, should state abortion laws include exceptions for rape, incest, or human trafficking, and why or why not? Of course, the 15-week abortion ban that passed in the Florida legislature does not include those exceptions for within 15 weeks. And you wrote that there's always exceptions to the rules, and they should be stated as such. It shouldn't be a one-shoe-fits-all approach. My question is, what is the shoe that fits Florida? Like, what are you for here?
Well, I'm for women's choice, first off, because it's the woman's body and they should have the choice at the final say so. Governor DeSantis, I know, after the Supreme Court ruled to overturn Roe versus Wade, that we have up to 15 weeks, which is 3.5 months. And before I was a father, I would probably have argued that. But since I became a father and went to the doctors for sonograms and 3D sonograms, I realized, how the fetus is formed and at what stages. And as though everybody would like to say, I get rape and incest, horrible. But overall, in the whole country, out of all the abortions, rape only accounts for 1% of all abortions, and 80% of those rapes that are reported and go to the hospital, the woman takes the morning after pill. And incest only accounts for maybe 0.5%. And there's only in Florida, well, not only, but which is horrible, but there's about 80,000 abortions a year. I think I read in an article from Sun Sentinel. And out of those 80,000, really only 1,600 people are going over 16 weeks to have an abortion. So I honestly think there should be laws that are written into what Governor DeSantis passed that does give it a woman right after 15 weeks if something is wrong with the fetus or the baby. Or because I have had a friend who just dealt with this, and it was unfortunately after the 15 weeks, and they had some bad news from their doctors. And firsthand, I witnessed the devastation it caused to the father and the mother, and how tough that decision was to make. And unfortunately, they had to make a decision, and it really crushed them. And I know she's been dealing with it for a while. But I think still that's the woman's choice after a 15-week period, that if something is wrong with the fetus, and I know the law states as of now that if the baby can't survive out of the womb, then they might be able to terminate it. But I don't think that should be as I said, one shoe fits all, because if something is, wrong with that child, some people, can't deal with certain things. And I understand both sides of the aisle, but there's that fine line, and I'm kind of right in the middle. But I think we need to go back to the state and implement laws that and have them on the books that state after 15 weeks. I mean, if you have two doctors that say possibly something could happen or be wrong, with all the science we have now, we know even earlier if something's wrong. But there are cases that it does go past 15 weeks. I think that should be a woman's choice. And I'm all for implementing laws that make it a woman's choice after that period.
Hillary Sell, is there anything in there that you agree or disagree with? Respond to what your opponent just said.
I mean, I think what we have here is a one size fits all. This is the terms, and this is the only time that you can fall into it and have access to healthcare. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a woman's right to healthcare, and it shouldn't be qualified with an explanation or a justification. The reality is the statistics that we have when it comes to rape and incest, when it's reported, are not accurate. Women are not, if you're in that position where a family member has done this to you, more likely than not, the chances of you coming to that reality in the time frame necessary to get access to healthcare or having the support or it shouldn't have to be justified. It should be able to say, this is my body, this is my time in life, this is the decision that I'm making, and I shouldn't have to justify it to anybody. The healthcare is available, it's accessible, and it should be. And a woman shouldn't have to provide an explanation, a justification, or a reason for making a decision about how she wants to live her life.
Okay. one thing in your questionnaires where you two definitely disagree is on support of an open carry or constitutional carry law for Florida. Hillary, you wrote, I vehemently oppose both open carry and constitutional carry. Guy, in yours, you said you support constitutional carry gun laws. I think citizens should be able to protect their families, businesses, and themselves. Now, for those who aren't aware of current Florida gun law, this is not an open carry state. You need to have a concealed carry permit to carry your gun around in public, and there are some exceptions to where exactly you can bring a gun, even if it is concealed. So, Guy, why don't you get into your answer a little bit? You said you support constitutional carry gun laws, and you think citizens should be able to protect their families, businesses, and themselves. How will a constitutional carry law in Florida better allow people to do that?
Well, I first believe in the Second Amendment and the people's protection to be able to protect themselves, their family, and their business. As you see across the country, there's horrific crimes being committed. And these laws are only going to affect the citizen that follows the law. Even if we institute more gun laws and more stuff, the criminals aren't following the gun laws. They're going to have guns regardless if we have guns or we don't have guns. We're never going to stop that. Guns have been around since the Western days. I mean, there's billions of guns, I'm sure, in the United States. So it's never going to stop the criminals from getting guns across the border illegally, stealing them. And I don't think any new law on the books, it's only going to infringe the law-abiding citizen that should be able to protect themselves, because a police officer can't be everywhere all the time.
But do you think under the current law with concealed carry permits, do you think citizens are not able to protect their families and businesses and themselves adequately?
No, I think that's fine. When I was 18 years old and they started the concealed carry permit, I went with my uncle. He took me to get my concealed weapons license, and I've been a law-abiding citizen since I've been 18 years old with a gun. And I think there should be some type of training that goes along with carrying a gun. You shouldn't just be allowed to carry a gun, but it is your right to be able to defend yourself. And I don't think the government should be able to tell you that you're not allowed to. I mean, I understand we live in Florida and it's very congested, but there are other states that, you're out in the country and it could be an hour before a police officer gets to your home. What are they supposed to do? They have to defend themselves in their homes. It would be too late before anybody would arrive. And even us in Florida, I think we deserve that right. And everyone in the country deserves that right to be able to protect themselves.
Hillary, I'd like you to react to that too, since you were strongly against open and constitutional carry. And I have to say, Guy, real quick, you said there should be some training involved. My understanding of constitutional carry is that it's any sort of training regimen would restrict the Second Amendment right.
Right.
So constitutional carry
there's
would be,
that fine line. I mean, I think you should be well versed at using a gun, and I think you should have some sort of training. I understand that you can't implement that law because it kind of washes out the constitutional carry law, but there is that fine line there. I mean, but in situations, you have to be able to defend yourself. You just can't rely on the police and responders coming to you to help you out. And as the gentleman who was in the shopping center, I don't remember which state it was, and an active shooter came out of the bathroom. This gentleman wasn't an officer, wasn't anything, just a concealed carry permit person. And he took out the shooter within 5 seconds, I think it was, where even the police said that was like, he saved so many lives in the shopping center. So, I mean, now he's a hero, but you want to take away his right to be able to carry. I just don't believe in that. I think everybody should have that right.
To use another old joke, Hillary, when seconds matter, the police are minutes away. So what do you respond to what Guy just said? What do you? I know you're opposed to opening and constitutional carry. what do you think about the right to self-defense and how these laws would affect that one way or the other?
I think the reality is the Second Amendment, which I support as well, talks about a well-regulated militia for a reason. When you can't say in one breath, well, government shouldn't be able to regulate guns, but in the same breath say that government should be able to regulate my decisions about how I choose to, form my family, and healthcare decisions about my body that can be life or death. When seconds matter and I need to be able to make a decision with my doctor, the government has prevented that. So what we have right now is a system where regulation is important when it comes to gun. I believe the gentleman that you were referring to, Mr. Silla, had a carry and concealed permit. He had been through the training. He had the required documentation, the background check. That's what we're asking for. What's being proposed here in the state of Florida. I'm a mom. We have a gun epidemic. I worry about sending my kid to school every day. And if I'm in Publix and I see an 18-year-old walking down the hallway with a gun down the aisle in Publix, who shoots first? Because that's what this allows. It allows for you to carry a gun with no training, with no permitting, with no background check, with no oversight whatsoever. And what does Publix look like? That's what I see when we talk about passing these types of laws. What does Publix look like? Who shoots first in Publix? Because we don't know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. And we're also a stand your ground state. So now you have free for all to be able to say, I was in fear and I did what I did as a result of that. Now is a time where we need to regulate access to guns. I'm not saying take guns away, but regulation and making sure people have appropriate training and that their intentions are not nefarious is important when we have such a gun epidemic. We're not saying you can't have guns. What we're saying is apply like you would for a driver's license. You can't drive on the roads in the state of Florida without a license. You can't drive on the roads in the state of Florida without taking a course, without taking a test, without somebody saying your eyes are good. Why is that so difficult when it comes to weapons that have the ability to take lives? I don't think it should be something that is even up for conversation. So I vehemently oppose it, and I will be a staunch advocate to ensuring that guns are regulated and that people have access to them within those confines.
Okay.
When you're walking down the aisle in Publix, first off, you don't know who is carrying a gun or who isn't carrying a gun now. So that statement, I don't believe really attributes, as the gentleman walked into Publix and shot the security guard not long ago.
They don't just get to hold it out in their hands. They don't get to just hold it out in their hands and display it like they would be able to under this type of law. They would be able to hold it out and display it and walk down Publix.
Right, and I don't think the open carry, I don't think everybody should have a gun on their hip like in the old Western days, but I think they should be allowed to have a concealed weapon. I mean, if you are in Publix and you're with your child and someone comes in and starts shooting and comes up your aisle, I'm sure you'd be happy that if someone on your aisle had a gun to defend you and your child.
Well, it sounds like
the question relates
and about women's rights, and they chose to have unprotected sex. I mean, I get what you're saying, it's their choice, but they made that choice to have unprotected sex, whatever age they did, and conceive a child. I know I was taught by my father when I was young, be careful, use protected sex, because once you have a child, you have a responsibility. And that's the reason I didn't have a child until I was 40 years old, because I knew I had to create a job and a life before I could be financially responsible to take care of that child. So on one foot, you can't say, well, it's their right, but it was their right not to protect sex or not have sex at all until a certain age where they are able to afford a child. So, I mean,
you seem to be very
we can go both ways on everything.
To come from a great family, to have had that privilege of that education. And sadly, not everybody in the state, not everybody in our district has that opportunity.
I think with the school teaching all the children nowadays about sex, that it's out there and they notice what's going on. And with the internet, I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old, and believe me, they know so much more than I did at their age. So
sadly,
it's not out there in the world.
Don't have access to the internet. So.
I would beg to differ.
This is a good segue, because when we asked in our questionnaire to name your top 3 issues, your first issue was family education, parental rights in our schools, and the safety of our children. Dig into that a little bit more, because it was just that one line. What more needs to be done in Florida regarding parental rights in our schools and the safety of our children than has been done.
I think the parents have a right to know, and since COVID, parents have woken up to seeing what is actually being taught to our children in school. And I think they should know what's being taught and have a decision in what's being taught. I mean, I think, unfortunately, nowadays we're worried about how everybody feels. I think teachers are there to educate. And, let's teach our kids about reading, about math, and about history, so we don't make all the same mistakes we do. And the safety of our kids. I mean, after Columbine, Marjorie Stoneman, I mean, it was just horrible what happened. And as a contractor, I worked with companies where we installed safety fences and gates, panic gates throughout schools in Broward County. And that went on for a year and a half after the incident. And then it died off. I think the state needs to stay on top of this stuff. I think we need fences around the school that people just can't come and go as they please.
Well, hold on.
And
The Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Safety Act that was passed immediately after that mandated that schools must be one way in, one way out. Are you saying that no longer is the case, that there are just open schools in Broward County where you can just walk on from any direction?
I'm not saying that. I don't know all the schools, but I think they stopped a lot of the funding towards implementing more safety and protocols for higher fences, for gates that you have to walk in and out of that are locked, that I used to install. And I think we need to get back to that and keep it going, not just when an incident happens, all of a sudden it's on the hot topic that, oh, we got to get back to this. No, I think it still has to be implemented throughout our schools, Dade, Broward, and throughout our state and throughout our country. I mean, you see firsthand what happens, and it's just horrible. And it's just not going to stop, because I think children nowadays have too much information coming to them on the internet and all their YouTube channels and TikTok and everything else that, they want to take it that next step. And if they are something wrong mentally or are depressed or anything, it's a gateway. I mean, as a child, I used to read the paper in the Sun Sentinel and the Miami Herald. You'd get the big, thick papers. And unfortunately, not anymore. I mean, kids didn't have that access to what's going on in the world and what's going on in society. And now everybody's trying to one-up each other and bully each other on the internet. And I think, this is definitely a problem in our society now.
Hillary Cassel, do parents not have enough say in what their children are learning in traditional public schools in Florida?
I'm the mom of a 6-year-old. I do math and reading homework every single night. My child obviously is in the beginning stages of his educational career. And I think what we see is a constant narrative by the other side of the aisle of this creation of fear. The reality is our public school teachers aren't teaching what is being discussed in Tallahassee. They are teaching curriculum. They aren't indoctrinating our children into conforming genders and deciding who they are. They are helping these children move in a place of education and safety and concern and true love and passion for this job. That's why teachers go into it. We know they don't go into it for the money. We know they don't go into it for the appreciation. They go into it for their love of children and to watch and help children grow and learn and succeed. And all we are doing in Tallahassee, or all that is being done in Tallahassee, is continuing to put a wedge in between teachers having the ability to educate students. We have approved curriculums. We have years and years of education of understanding what children need. And that's the curriculum that's based on experts who make the decision about what our children should be learning and the types of books. And what we're seeing with Governor DeSantis and the passing of the Don't Say Gay bill and removal of math books that talk about, yes, emotions and feelings, because that's how you produce a society that gets along a lot better than we are in this country, because they're being educated on how to handle conflict and how to handle disagreements. And they're being taught through curriculum. This isn't a situation where what is being discussed in reference to the Don't Say Gay bill is actually happening in our school systems. These teachers are more worried about testing and making sure these students pass these day of tests that don't talk about a child in the totality. So there's so many issues, and focusing on a parent's right. A parent has a right. A parent has access to see what comes home every day. But let's leave educating to educators. I am not a teacher. I chose not to be one for a reason. I like to leave education to those that have sought that as a profession, have the experience, have received the education, and have the wherewithal to teach our young minds in this state of Florida to see them grow and succeed. That's all our teachers want to do. And we need to give them the tools and the resources to be able to do that job, not the job that we're creating for them, which is fear, terror of lawsuits, being afraid of saying the wrong thing. They should be able to teach, comfort, educate, and help these children succeed through our education system.
Guy,
Dan, first
Go
of all,
ahead.
I don't think it was called the "Don't Say Gay" bill, but that is a catchy phrase, and it's K through third grade. And honestly, as a father with a parent with kids, I really don't want the education system to teach my child at that age anything, whether it's for men, women, married couples. It shouldn't be their responsibility to teach our children any of that. So I don't see what the big issue is with the K through third grade. As a father, I don't see that issue. When my son was in fifth grade, he was coming home and all the kids are talking about if they're gay or a lesbian. I mean, this is fifth grade. They haven't even kissed a boy or a girl yet. And they're asking him, well, are you gay? I'm a lesbian. And I'm thinking, well, this shouldn't even be, I mean, they should be out playing, having fun, and being kids. And yeah, it sounds good that the teachers only want to teach education and everything else, but it's been proven time and time again with some of the books that are rewriting history to make it what they want. I mean, unfortunately, history is not always good, but that's what makes us better as a country and as a whole.
Guy,
I mean, if we don't have history, then go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. You mentioned that this is a law that applies to kindergarten through third grade, and one of the big controversies of this is that it has had unintended consequences. In that, I'm going to read the exact wording of the bill here. This is, by the way, House Bill 1557, Parental Rights in Education, referred to by your opponent as "Don't Say Gay." It says, classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through third grade, or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. The problem in implementing this law has not been in K through 3. It's been what we've seen in Seminole County with them having to cover up yearbooks that mention LGBT protests. It's been in Pasco County where in high schools, the teachers were told to take away stickers that said this is a safe space for LGBT teens. Were there unintended consequences from this bill? Because it's not really just about K through 3. That's how it was sold, but it's that second line, or where it's age appropriate. Who says age appropriate, especially in a bill that opens up these teachers to lawsuits?
I agree. There's always I guess
I know that's a hard part of the bill, but it's
yeah,
the
there's always
part, so I'd like to
repercussions
get
to
into that.
everything. There's always repercussions to everything that is written into law, unfortunately. And as we're going and learning from the mistakes that these bills are causing, yeah, I think you have to go back in and tweak them. Yeah, I mean, you can't. All these bills are great and they have great. They want to make everything better, and it's hard in a society, even with the gun laws. You want to stop the gun laws, and then they want to stop how many bullets you can have in a magazine. So I mean, every law goes a little bit extra. It's not just, oh, we should be with the gun laws, even that they want to take away this gun and that gun, and you shouldn't be able to buy that gun. So there's always those rules that are going to be, you have to tweak. You got to go back and fix them. You got to learn from your mistakes. And if you don't learn from your mistakes, we all make mistakes. And if you don't learn, you aren't the person you are today. So those are some problems with the law. But as a whole, I see what they were trying to do. But these are circumstances that no one saw coming with the law, whether you want to believe it or not. And those shouldn't be. I mean, you shouldn't be. I mean, I have a lot of LGBTQ friends. For the past 30 years. I mean, it's not even something that we thought of. I mean, we grew up with or interrelational marriages and gay couples. I mean, it's something I grew up with. It's not even like a thought for me, where now it's on the front burner and I understand it. But I think it's something that just has to go back to the state, and we have to work on it, and we have to implement new laws or amendments to these bills so this doesn't happen. And you can't cover up flags or take off bumper stickers or anything like that.
Hillary Cassel, is House Bill 1557, I'm avoiding calling it either Don't Say Gay or Parental Rights in Education, is House Bill 1557 something that can be tweaked, or is this something that you think needs to be like totally uprooted if there were a Democratic majority in the legislature?
Listen, if there were a Democratic majority, it needs to be uprooted. The reality is I was in session when this bill was discussed. I filed, paperwork to be able to testify with regards to it. So I was there in committee meetings watching this bill and hearing what the intent of it was. And if the intent of it was to stop all types of education, and I agree with you, Guy. I'm a mother of a 6-year-old. Those are conversations that I want to have at home. But at the end of the day, we know that those instructions weren't happening in kindergarten through 3. And Senator Brandis actually filed an amendment, a Republican filed an amendment and said, listen, if as a parent, I agree that we shouldn't talk about any of this in kindergarten through 3rd grade. And as a mom, I agree with that. They're too young. But the reality is this specific bill terminology was utilized to solely, call out LGBTQ members of the community. And that's where this legislation went way farther than it ever needed to. One, we know that this wasn't the curriculum that teachers were teaching in kindergarten through 3rd grade. So we didn't need this legislation. It was a fear piece of legislation, but add fuel to that fire. They added specific language to hurt members of the LGBTQ community specifically. So if a Democratic majority wins, we get a Democratic governor, I think this legislation needs to be completely repealed. It is harmful. It is interfering with teachers' ability to teach because they're so afraid. I mean, I have friends that go to a local Montessori school, local public Montessori school. Whether the rainbows were up out of support and solidarity for LGBTQ or because they're kids and my kid loves rainbows, not understanding the additional message of what that sends, they had to take down all the rainbows in the school. My kid loves rainbows. He gets super excited when he sees one in the sky. It's a sign of light and hope. But out of fear, these schools are taking them down because they're even afraid to have a rainbow in kindergarten. Imagine going to kindergarten and not seeing a rainbow. So this bill has gone way too far. It doesn't do what it was intended to do, which again, wasn't necessary because this isn't what our teachers were teaching, and has created as a result of that a lot of anxiety for teachers when they just want to do their job. And I think this bill needs to be completely repealed.
All right. Well, I have to be cognizant of our time. We're approaching 10 o'clock and we have, more interviews throughout the day. I'm sure we could talk a lot more about this, but I want to give both of you a chance to sort of wrap up and give what you'd call an elevator pitch to voters. If you've got a minute with a voter and you want to tell them why you are the best candidate for this job, why, what makes you a better candidate than your opponent, then now is your time to do that. And since we kicked off of this in alphabetical order, I will go in reverse alphabetical order, and I will give Guy Silla the first word.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you, Dan, for the opportunity to speak, and Hillary, thank you, and the Sun Sentinel for taking this time for us. I'd like to tell the voters my expertise is in infrastructure and construction, and I think the state spends a lot of money on infrastructure and construction, and I don't think many people in Tallahassee probably have the experience I have in this department. Yes, we have a lot of attorneys and a lot of people that know the law, and I'm just an everyday guy wanting to do what's right for our constituents on both sides of the aisle, not just for one particular group or one particular party. I'm kind of walk right down the line, right down the middle, and I hope you give me a chance coming in November to represent you and all the things I think are very important to our state, including, rising sea levels, protecting our education system and our children, and protecting our police and our first responders to make sure they're funded and stay funded, and we don't have issues like other states are having with crimes, and making sure criminals pay for what they do and not just be able to walk out after with no bond and no accountability. And again, thank you, and thank you, Hillary.
Cassel, go ahead and you'll get the last word.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan, for having us both and giving us this opportunity. Guy, it's been a pleasure to finally get a chance to meet you and put a voice with the face. So thank you for being here. I appreciate your time and hearing your position on things. And I think the reality is this particular seat here is really the heart of Broward's economic infrastructure. It contains the airport, Port Everglades, the coastline from Dania to Miami-Dade, you know, the Hard Rock, our tourism, and every house and person and business in between. And we really need somebody that can get to Tallahassee and has the ability to, one, work across the aisle, having been engaged in the legislative process for the last 4 years, fighting for consumers against big insurance companies. You know, property insurance is bipartisan. Hurricane Ian hit this state, and it didn't matter if you were a Republican or a Democrat. And I've worked across the aisle in Tallahassee on really important issues that impact everyday Floridians. This is a job that you have 60 days to figure out how it works, and we can't afford the learning curve. You know, the reality is because of the importance of this seat in Broward as the heart of our economic infrastructure, you know, you can't be learning how to get, you know, to your office and to the bathroom and to committee meetings and how the entire process works. I hit the ground day one running, knowing how to advocate, knowing how to read the law, apply the law, interpret the law, and fight against bad laws. We shouldn't be spending 60 days in a legislative session passing laws that we then have to fix the following year. That's part of the problem. That is a waste of taxpayer dollars when we're constantly fixing bad legislation that actually doesn't solve the problem. Look where we're at in the property insurance crisis. We're still here because we've spent year after year after year fixing a problem and have never actually found the result. We can't continue to afford that in housing. We can't continue to afford it with regards to our health insurance, with our education, with our environment. These are all issues that I'm extremely passionate about, that I'm familiar with, and that on day one in Tallahassee, I hit the ground running for this district. So I hope I can count on the Sun Sentinel for, you know, an opportunity for an endorsement. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to the constituents of District 101 making the right choice, which I believe is me.
Okay, thank you. We'll end it there, and I want to thank you both for your time. Truly appreciate it. And yeah, we'll have an endorsement, you know, within a week or so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.